The lights in the training hall came on one row at a time, the way they always did, humming as they warmed, and for a few seconds the room was half dark and half bright, and I stood in the seam of it, with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. It was 0500. Outside, the installation was still the color of slate, that flat, pre-dawn gray that has no shadows in it yet. I could hear the first formation somewhere across the quad, a cadence rolling low and even, 60 young voices turning fear into rhythm the way we teach them to. I had been one of those voices once. Now I wrote the words they ran to. I set my coffee on the podium and pulled up the first slide of the block I taught 3 mornings a week. Leadership Under Fire. The title sat there in plain white letters, and under it, a map with the names scrubbed off. A wadi that could have been anywhere. Arrows that meant more to me than they would ever mean to the kids who copied them into their notebooks. I had stood inside that map. I did not tell them that. It was not on the slide, and it was not in my voice. And for a long time, I had believed that keeping it out of both was a kind of strength. There is a particular quiet to a classroom before the students come. I had learned to love it. It was the only hour of my day that belonged to no one, not the army, not my family, not the story either of them told about me. I walked the rows of empty chairs and squared them, because a squared room settles a nervous mind, and I checked the projector bulb, and I filled the water pitcher, small acts, the housekeeping of a person who has learned that you study the world by studying the little pieces of it you can reach. A recruit came in early, the way one always does, the anxious one, the one who has decided that being first will save him. Private Kessler. 19 years old, ears too big for his high and tight, a face that had not yet learned what it was going to look like. He stopped just inside the door and came to the stiff, overcorrect position of attention that new soldiers use when they are not yet sure a room is theirs to stand in. "At ease, Private," I said. "You are early enough that the room is still mine. What do you need?" "Ma'am," he hesitated. "Permission to ask something that is not on the test." "Granted. How do you stop being afraid?" I looked at him for a moment. The honest answer is that you do not. The useful answer is longer. "You do not stop," I said. "Fear is just energy with no orders. If you leave it standing around with nothing to do, it will start running the place. So you give it a task, you check your people, you check your rounds, you pick the next thing that has to happen, the very next thing, and you make that one thing happen, and then the one after it. The fear does not leave. It just moves to the back of the room and waits, and while it waits, you work. Courage is not the absence of the thing in the back of the room. Courage is keeping your hands busy with the next right task while it stands there." He wrote that down like it was going to be graded. I did not tell him I had learned it on a road that smelled like diesel and copper, with a young man named Dorn bleeding into my sleeve while I counted, out loud, the seconds between the next thing and the next thing after it. I turned off the front row of lights so the screen would read better, and I straightened the slide, and I did not look at the far wall where, 6 feet up, in a plain black frame, there was a photograph of me in dress uniform, with a small blue ribbon at my chest, a photograph the recruits walked past every day without ever once connecting it to the officer who told them to give their fear a task. More of them filed in, sleep still on them, and I taught. I was good at it. I will not be falsely modest about the one thing in my life I have never doubted. I could take a room of scared teenagers and, for 50 minutes, make the worst day of a stranger's life into a set of decisions they could hold in their hands and turn over and learn from. I watched them lean forward when the map went up. I watched them understand, a few at a time, that leadership is not a feeling. It is a sequence of small, correct choices made faster than your fear can talk you out of them. There was a letter in my desk drawer that I did not talk about either. It was 3 years old, and the ink had gone soft from being unfolded too many times. And it was from Dorn's mother, a woman in a small town in a state I had never once set foot in, thanking me, in careful cursive, for bringing her boy home with his legs. I had written her back a single time, and then never again, because there is nothing you can say to a letter like that which does not sound like you are asking to be thanked twice. But I kept it. On the mornings when the family arithmetic pressed hardest on the callus, I would slide the drawer open, not even to read it, only to see that it was there, Proof in soft ink that somewhere a mother knew exactly what I was and had wept over it at her kitchen table. It is a strange thing to be a stranger's answered prayer and your own family's running joke, both at once, in the same skin, on the same ordinary Tuesday. I had learned to hold both. I had not learned how to stop kneading the drawer. The army had handed me its 19-year-olds and told me to teach them how to be brave. My own family had handed me a nickname and told me to be quiet. Both of those things were true at the same time, every single day, and I had made my peace with the arithmetic of it a long time ago. Or I thought I had. There is a kind of peace that is really just a callus, and you do not find out which one you have until something presses on it hard enough to reach the nerve underneath. To understand my mother-in-law, you have to understand a boy I never met. Nathan Holloway was my husband's younger brother. He was 23 when he died, in a country I have since flown over more times than I can count, and he died in a uniform, and after that the whole family looked at cloth the way some people look at deep water. They did not hate it exactly. They feared it, and they turned the fear into a set of rules about who was allowed to be real. My husband Cole was the one who told me, early, before we were married, on a porch in the dark, in a voice that had been sanded flat by 14 years of use. He told me his mother had not cried at the funeral. He told me she had ironed Nathan's dress shirt for the casket herself and had not let anyone else touch it. That she had stood at the ironing board at 2 a.m, pressing the same collar over and over until his aunt gently took the iron out of her hand. He told me she had gathered every photograph of Nathan, in uniform, in the house. Every last one, and put them in a drawer in the spare room, and had not opened the drawer since. And then he told me gently, like a man laying a plate on a table he was not sure would hold it, that his mother did not like that I was a soldier. I was a first lieutenant then. I had a silver star I did not talk about, and a scar along my hip I talked about even less. I thought I understood what he was telling me. I thought it was grief, and I thought grief was a weather system, something you waited out under good cover, patient, until it passed over and the sky came back. I did not understand that it was going to be aimed at me for 16 years. Gail Holloway was not a cruel woman in the ordinary sense, and I need you to believe that, because the easy version of this story is a wicked mother-in-law, and the easy version is a lie. She brought soup when Cole's cousin had surgery. She remembered every birthday and wrote the cards by hand and pressed a folded $20 bill inside for the children. She kept a garden that people slowed their cars to look at. She was, by the measure the family used, a good mother and a better grandmother. But she had taken the largest wound of her life, and she had built a story around it so that she would never have to stand near the wound again. And the story went like this. Real work leaves your hands dirty. Real families do not play soldier. Anyone who put on a uniform on purpose, who chose it, who was not dragged into it, was either a fool or was doing it to be seen. She said these things the way other people say grace, automatically, as a way of blessing the table with the shape of the world she needed it to have. She never said the word Nathan when she said them. She did not have to. He was the whole weight under every word, the stone at the bottom of the well, and every sentence she dropped down came back up wet with him. Cole's grandfather, the family patriarch, a man named Douglas, had believed a plainer version of the same creed. He had been the kind of man who thought the only honest jobs were the ones that made you tired in your back. And he had said, more than once, at more than one table, that he did not know why a young woman would want to run around in boots pretending to be a man. Douglas died in the year I made first lieutenant. Gail took up the flag of his opinion at the graveside, and carried it further than he ever had, because she had a reason he never had, a reason with a name and a folded drawer. I could give you a catalog of the 16 years. I will give you 3 so you understand the texture of it. And then I will stop, because a catalog of small cruelties is its own kind of dishonesty. It makes a person into a case file. The first time she called me a nobody in a uniform, I had been married to her son for 2 years. It was a kitchen, a holiday, a sink full of dishes. She said it to her sister, not to me, but loud enough, in the way that is designed to be overheard and then denied if you object. That one, she said, with her costume and her little medals, a nobody who likes to dress up. I was drying a serving bowl, her mother's bowl, hand-painted, older than either of us. I set it down very carefully so it would not chip, and I said nothing, because Cole had asked me on the drive over to please just let it be a nice day. The second was a christening, a cousin's baby. I had come straight from a training rotation, still in uniform, because there had been no time to change, and Gail met me at the church door and looked me up and down and said, in front of the family filing in, "Well, somebody wants attention at a baby's christening." And then she smiled and hugged me for the benefit of the others, so that if I flinched, I would be the one who had ruined the hug. The third I will keep short. There were 2 boys at that table, Kurt's sons, 7 and 9, and Kurt, Cole's cousin, a man who had never risked a single thing in his life and had therefore developed very strong opinions about risk, asked me across the mashed potatoes whether I had ever actually done anything over there or whether I just filed the paperwork for the men who did. He thought this was hilarious. His mother, my mother-in-law's sister, laughed. Gail laughed. And the 2 boys, 7 and 9, watched me the exact way children watch, to see what the adults have decided a person is worth. And I understood that I was, in that moment, teaching them, and that whatever I did next they would file away as the correct way to treat a woman like me. I set the bowl down carefully. I let the joke pass. I made myself smaller than I was so that a grieving woman and her chorus would not have to feel one uncomfortable thing. I told myself it was kindness, and some of it was, and I did it for 16 years. Cole was there for most of it, and Cole said nothing for most of it, and I have had to learn to hold his silence and his goodness in the same hand, because both are true at once. He loved me in the private rooms of our life. He warmed my side of the bed on the nights I came home from a rotation, too wired to sleep. He learned, without ever being asked, which noises woke me badly and which ones did not. But in his mother's house, he became a boy again, and the boy had one law written over everything else, which was that his mother must never lose another child, not to a war, not to a marriage, not to a single hard word at a dinner table. So he spent me. Quietly, apologetically, a little more each year. He spent my dignity to buy her comfort, and he told himself, the way all of us tell ourselves the things we need, that I was strong and did not really mind, and I let him keep believing it, because telling him the truth would have cost him something. And I had gotten so used to being the one at that table who paid. And still, when my command sent the invitations for Family Day, I put 2 of them in an envelope and mailed them to Cole's mother. One more open hand. I have thought a great deal since about why I kept opening it, kept offering the same hand to the same closed door. I think I wanted her to see the thing itself, the real thing, not the costume in her story. I think part of me believed, the way you believe a thing you have never tested, that if she could only stand inside my world for one afternoon, the story would not survive contact with it. I was right about that. I was just terribly wrong about how much it would cost her to be there, and how much it would cost me to make her. Family Day at a training installation is one of the best days the Army does, and I say that as someone who has stood on a lot of days that were not. The recruits have been broken down and built back up over 10 weeks, and this is the day they get to show the people they love who they have become. The families come from every corner of the country, and most of them have never set foot on a post before, and you can see it on them, the way they walk in slow and tip their heads back to look at things, the flags, the old artillery pieces set in concrete, the sheer scale of it. There are folding chairs on the parade field and a big tent with cold water and lemonade and the smell of cut grass baking under hot canvas. There is a review and there are speeches, and then there is a reception where mothers cry into their programs and fathers stand very straight and pretend they are not about to. I had a role that day. I was one of the small group leaders whose recruits were graduating, and I had helped plan the event. And I wore my service uniform, pressed the night before. And I will tell you the truth without decorating it. I was proud, and I had let myself hope, on the drive-in, with Cole quiet beside me and his mother quiet in the back seat, that the day might do the thing I could not do with 16 years of words. The drive was 90 minutes. Gail sat behind me and narrated the highway. She did not like the trucks. She did not like the tolls. She did not like the coffee at the place we stopped, and she told the young woman at the counter so, kindly, in the voice that makes kindness a weapon. Cole drove and said the small, soothing things he had spent his life saying. Yes, Mom. I know, Mom. We are almost there, Mom. and I watched the fields go by and practiced, without quite admitting I was practicing, the thing I always practiced, which was how to take up less room. Gail got out of the car at the visitor center and looked at the gate, the flags, the young soldiers directing traffic with white gloves, and I watched her face close like a hand. "So many of them," she said. It was not a compliment. It was the sound of a woman counting uniforms and finding every one of them a small ambush. We found seats under the tent. The review was beautiful. It is always beautiful, and it does not get less beautiful for being predictable, the way a sunrise does not. 240 young people, who 10 weeks earlier could not march 10 feet in a straight line, moved across that field like one breathing thing. The drill sergeants stood off to the sides with their campaign hats pulled low over their eyes, and if you knew what you were looking at, you could see the pride they were not allowed to show sitting on them like a coat they refused to take off in the heat. Somewhere a mother was already weeping into a program. Cole leaned forward with his forearms on his knees, and I saw something move across his face. And I knew he was thinking about Nathan. Because a review is a graduation, and Nathan had had one of these once too. And I reached over and put my hand on his back, and he let me. Kurt had come. He sat 2 seats down with his older son, a teenager now, and he kept his arms crossed and made a small sound through his nose every time the announcer said the word, honor. Gail watched the field with her lips pressed thin. I told myself the day was still young. I told myself the review might reach her. I was still, even then, holding out the hand. After the review, the families flooded the tent, and it was loud and joyful, and I was standing near the center pole with a paper cup of lemonade sweating in my fingers when a colonel I knew stopped to say hello. He was a good officer, a brigade commander, a serious man not given to small talk, and he shook my hand and thanked me for the block I taught because his own daughter had gone through it 2 cycles back and had come home to Sunday dinner talking about the lieutenant in the story, about the decisions, about giving your fear a task, not knowing she was describing the woman who wrote it. He did not know the story was mine either. He only knew the block was good. He thanked me for it in front of the little circle of families that had gathered near us the way families do near anyone in uniform who seems to be somebody. And he moved on. That was when Gail decided she had heard enough. I did not see it build. I heard it land. Her voice cut across the little circle, pitched up and bright and carrying, the voice she used when she wanted a room and did not want to admit she wanted it. "Oh, don't let her fool you," she said, to the colonel's back, to the families, to the children, to the canvas and the cut grass and the flags. "This is my son's wife. She plays army on weekends." A few people laughed, the uncertain laugh of strangers who are not sure yet whether a thing is a joke and want to be safe either way. Gail felt the laugh, and it fed her, the way it always had, and she gave them the rest of it, the line she had been sharpening for 16 years. Bless her, she even wears the little medals. I had faced men who wanted me dead. I had lain in the dirt while the air came apart over my head and kept my voice level enough to talk 2 vehicles out of a kill zone. I do not say that to boast. I say it because I want you to understand that I did not know a room could take the cold out of a person the way that tent took it out of me. It was not fear. I was not afraid of Gail Holloway. It was something worse than fear and quieter. It was the specific chill of being made small in front of children who still believed the uniform meant something, by a woman who was supposed to be my family, while my husband stood 2 feet to my left and studied the grass between his shoes. The colonel's face did something careful. He had the good grace to look at his own hands and let the moment be mine to manage, because a good senior officer knows when stepping in would only make a private wound a public one. The families around us went quiet in the particular way people go quiet when they can feel a wound has opened and they cannot tell yet whose it is. I set my cup down on the table beside me. I did not slam it. I set it down the way I had set down her mother's bowl all those years before, so it would not chip. "That's a lovely dress, Gail," I said. "I'm glad you came." And I meant to leave it there. I had gotten very, very good over 16 years at leaving it there. But the yard had already begun to turn, and I did not know it yet, and neither did she. Off at the edge of the tent where the graduating recruits had been released to go find their families, a young man had gone completely still. I did not notice Private Kessler at first. There were 240 of them, and they all looked in that flood of reunion like the same nervous, joyful, buzz-cut kid multiplied out to the tree line. But he had noticed me. He had been standing at a loose parade rest, waiting for his mother to make her way across the field, and he had looked up, and he had seen the brigade commander shake my hand, and then he had seen my face turn 3/4 toward him under the tent light, and then he had seen the small blue ribbon at my chest and the black and gold tab on my shoulder, and something in him had locked home like a rifle bolt. Because Private Kessler had spent the previous 10 weeks studying a map with the names scrubbed off. He had copied arrows into a notebook by red flashlight after lights out because he wanted to get them right. He had written down, in his own careful 19-year-old handwriting, the words a lieutenant had used on a radio to keep her people alive on a road that smelled like diesel and copper. In a darkened classroom, his drill sergeant had put up a photograph of the officer who had done that in dress uniform, with a small blue ribbon at her chest, and had said, "This is a real person, not a story. Remember her name." Kessler had walked past that same photograph in the training hall every single day for 10 weeks on his way to Chow. And now she was standing 40 feet away, being told by an older woman to a laughing circle of strangers that she played army on weekends. He turned to the drill sergeant nearest him, a hard, quiet, non-commissioned officer named Tavares, and he forgot for 1 second every rule about bearing that had been drilled into him, and he said 6 words. "We studied her. That's Captain Holloway." Tavares did not move his head. He had 32 years of not moving his head. But his eyes cut sideways to the private, and then across the tent to me, and then, unmistakably, to the woman in the floral dress who had just finished laughing at her own joke. "Eyes front, Private," Tavares said out of the side of his mouth, and then, a beat later, lower, "You're sure?" "Drill sergeant, her picture's on the wall. We had a whole block on her. The ambush." Kessler's voice had dropped to almost nothing, but it had the particular urgency of a 19-year-old who has just watched something true get called a lie to its face. "That is her, drill sergeant. I would swear to it on anything." Tavares looked at me for a long moment across the crowd. I felt it before I understood it, the way you feel a change in pressure in your ears before the weather turns. I looked up and met the eyes of a drill sergeant I had never met in my life, standing 30 feet away, and I watched a stranger in a campaign hat come slowly, deliberately, to a version of attention that no regulation required and no one had ordered. A small squaring of the shoulders and a stilling of the whole body that on a man like that meant more than any salute could have. He did not say anything. He did not have to. He simply took the weight of what he now knew and stood up straight inside it, and held my eyes and gave me the smallest nod. One professional to another, a nod that said, "I see it. I see what is happening to you, and I am not going to pretend I do not." The youngest people in that field knew my name by heart. The oldest people in my family had spent 16 years working to forget it. I looked back at Gail. She had not seen any of it. She was still riding the little high of having taken the room, still smiling at the strangers, already turning to Kurt to hand him the joke so he could carry it around the tent for her. She had no idea that the ground under the canvas had shifted, that a private and a drill sergeant 40 feet away had just quietly refused, without a word to her, to let her story stand on their post. I did not know yet how it would come out. I only knew that something had entered the yard that she could not see and could not stop, and that for the first time in 16 years I was not the only person in the room who knew who I was. Here is the part I am least proud of, so I will tell it plainly and take the loss. Between the tent and the reception, there is a covered walkway, brick, shaded, a good 10 degrees cooler than the open field, and Gail caught up to me there. And for one foolish moment, hearing her hurry her steps behind me, I thought she had come to apologize. She had come to scold me. "You are making a scene," she said. Her voice was low now, private, the public brightness switched off like a lamp. "Standing there letting that colonel fuss over you. You always do this. You always have to be the important one, wherever we go." I stopped walking. "Gail," I did not say a word. "You do not have to say a word. You do it with your face. You do it by standing there." She pulled her cardigan tighter across her chest, though it was July and the air was thick and warm. "This is these people's day. their sons and daughters, and you are out here collecting handshakes in your costume as if any of it is about you. And there it was, the whole machine of it, laid bare in a brick walkway. She would humiliate me in public, and then, in private, she would tell me that any hurt I felt was a scene I was choosing to make. A self I was insisting on, a vanity of mine. The insult, and then the reversal. One and then the other, so smooth from 16 years of practice that she probably no longer felt the seam between them. First she made me small, and then she told me that noticing I had been made small was the real offense. Cole arrived at the worst possible moment, which was his particular gift. He came around the corner with a plate of cookies he had gotten from somewhere, the eternal errand boy of his mother's comfort, and he read the air in half a second and put a hand on my arm. He did not put a hand on his mother's arm. I want you to hold on to that small choreography, because I have thought about it more than I have thought about anything Gail ever said. When the temperature dropped, his hand went to me, the strong one, the one he trusted to absorb it, and not to her. "Hey," he said quietly, only to me. "Can you not do this today? For Mom?" For 16 years, the answer had been yes. I want to be fair to Cole, because I love him, and because this is not a story about a villain, it is a story about a family. And families are harder and sadder than villains. Cole was not a coward in the ordinary places. He would carry a stranger's couch up 3 flights and never mention it. He sat all night with dying men from his church so their wives could sleep. But his mother had lost one son to the army, and Cole had spent his entire life, since that phone call, trying to make certain she never felt she was losing another child to anything. And so whenever she aimed herself at me, he did the arithmetic that frightened men do. He looked at the table and decided that my dignity was the cheapest thing on it, because I was the strongest person in the room and I would survive the spending of it. He was right that I would survive it. He was wrong, for 16 years, that it was cheap. "For Mom," I said. I was not angry when I said it. That is the thing I most want you to understand about that walkway. I was not angry. I was tired all the way to the bone. It has always been for Mom, Cole. Every table, every holiday, I have been smaller than I am at every single meal for 16 years, so that your mother would not have to feel one uncomfortable thing. And I did it. I want you to know that I did it, and for a long time I did it gladly because I understood what was underneath it. I understood her. "So do it one more time," he said. And I could hear the little boy under the man's voice, the boy who could not stand the thought of his mother making a sound in a public place. I looked past him, down the walkway, out into the sun, to where a drill sergeant in a campaign hat still stood at the edge of the field, watching me with the flat, patient attention of a man waiting to see what I was going to do with a thing he had handed me without a single word. I did not decide to have a reckoning. I need to be clear about that, because the story would be cleaner if I told you I squared my jaw and marched into that reception to set the record straight, and it would be a lie, and I have told enough small lies for that family to last me the rest of my life. I decided something much smaller than a reckoning. I decided to stop helping. That was all it was. For 16 years, I had been an active partner in the story that I was nobody. Every time I set the bowl down carefully and said nothing. Every time I let the joke pass. Every time I made myself smaller than I was, so that a grieving woman would not have to look at the uniform that took her boy. I had been holding one corner of the sheet while she painted her picture on it. I had told myself for 16 years that holding the corner was kindness. And maybe some of it was. But somewhere in the 16th year, standing in a brick walkway on my own post, I finally understood a simple thing. A lie you help someone maintain is a lie you are telling. I was not an innocent bystander to the story that I was nobody. I was its quietest and most reliable narrator. And I was standing in my own house. That was the thing that steadied me in the end. Not anger, location. This was my post. Those were my recruits out there in the sun. That photograph, 6 feet up on the training hall wall, was my face, my ribbon, my worst day made into a lesson that kept other people's children alive. For once in 16 years, the ground under my feet did not belong to her story. It belonged to the truth. And the truth did not require me to raise my voice or humiliate an old woman. It only required me to stop lowering myself. "I am not going to embarrass her, Cole," I said. And I meant it, and it turned out to be the truest promise I made all day. I'm not going to say one word about any of this in there. I am just going to walk into that room and be exactly who I am. I am done making myself less than that so your mother can feel more like she is right. If who I actually am embarrasses her, then it was always going to, and no amount of me shrinking was ever going to fix it. I have spent 16 years testing that. I have my answer." He did not understand. His face was still braced for a fight I was not going to give him. I left the two of them in the walkway. I did not storm off. I walked back toward the reception the way I walk everywhere, with my shoulders set where the army put them a long time ago. And I found, out in the cut grass under the flags, that I could breathe all the way to the bottom of my lungs for the first time since the tent. I was wearing the little medals. A 19-year-old 300 feet away could have told you what every one of them was for. I let that be true, and I kept walking, and I did not make myself small on the way. The reception was in the field house, out of the heat, and by the time I got there, it was full. Close to 400 people, families and recruits and cadre, packed under the high steel rafters. The recruits standing straighter than the civilians, because 10 weeks will do that to a spine. The whole room warm with the particular joy of that day. A joy that has grief braided all through it, because everyone in a room like that knows, on some floor of themselves, what these young people have signed up to possibly pay. Command Sergeant Major Duarte ran the reception. He was the senior enlisted leader of the training battalion, 49 years old, 4 combat tours behind him, a man built like a loading dock, with a voice he almost never needed to raise, because when he lowered it, people leaned in to catch it. I had briefed beside him a dozen times. I respected him the way you respect a load-bearing wall, the way you respect the thing that is quietly holding up more than its share and never mentions it. He was at the front of the room with a microphone he barely used, thanking the families, naming the recruits' companies, doing the warm, ordinary work of the day. And at some point in the previous 20 minutes, a drill sergeant named Tavares had walked up to that wall of a man and said something quietly into his ear. And Duarte had listened, without changing his face, and looked across the room at me exactly once, and given a small nod, and gone back to his remarks. I saw the look. I did not know what it meant. I know now. I found it out the way everyone else in that room found it out. "Before I let you all go find the cake," Duarte said, and the room laughed, warm, ready to be dismissed into their happiness. "I want to take one more minute of your time. Some of you have a soldier standing next to you right now who spent the last 10 weeks learning how to lead. And I want to tell you a little about how we teach that, because you paid for it, in a way. You gave us these kids for 10 weeks, and you deserve to know what we did with them." He let that settle. He was very good at letting things settle. A room will do half your work for you if you are not afraid of a little silence. And Duarte was afraid of nothing. "We do not teach leadership out of a book," he said. "Or not only. We teach it out of people. Real ones. We find soldiers who stood in the worst moment a person can stand in and made good decisions, fast, when everything in them was screaming to freeze. And we study exactly what they did, so that when the day comes, and for some of these young people it will come, their hands will already know the way." I felt the first cold touch of understanding, a half second before he said it, the way you sometimes hear the round before you hear the shot. "There is a block in this cycle called leadership under fire," Duarte said. "It is built around a real action, a convoy, an ambush, a young lieutenant, junior, younger than some of you standing here in caps and gowns of your own, who kept her head when the situation was as bad as this business gets. She got her people out of a kill zone, and then she went back into it, on foot, for the 2 who could not walk out on their own." He paused. "We teach her name in this battalion. We teach her decisions. I would bet that half the graduates in this room could stand up right now and walk you through what she did, minute by minute." And then Command Sergeant Major Duarte turned, and he looked at me, and 400 faces turned and followed his eyes across the room to where I stood by a folding table with a paper cup in my hand and no blood left in my face. "That officer," he said, is standing in this room today. She helped plan your family day. She's been handing your kids lemonade all afternoon. Captain Holloway. His voice did not rise. It went, if anything, quieter, and the quiet carried to every corner of that steel building. Ma'am, I hope you will forgive me for putting you on the spot, but these families fed us their children for 10 weeks, and I think they have earned the right to know that one of the people we trusted to give those children back was somebody their sons and daughters study. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. That is the whole thing about the truth. It does not need volume. It only needs to be let into the room. The room did what rooms do when something real lands in them. There was a beat of pure silence, one held breath, and then a sound started at the very back where the graduates were standing in their neat rows, and it moved forward through the crowd like weather. And it was applause, but it was not the polite applause of a reception. It was something with a spine in it. It was the applause of 240 young people who had spent 10 weeks being taught by hard people who loved them in the only way the job allows, to tell the difference between the real thing and the costume. And who had just watched the real thing get pointed out to them, standing right there in the flesh, in the little medals, being applauded by the whole room after being called a fraud by one voice under a tent an hour before. I did not cry. I have a great deal of practice not crying. I found Duarte's eyes over all those heads, and I gave him the smallest nod I could manage. Thank you, and please stop, both at once. And he read it exactly, because reading people was his life's work. And he turned the room gently back toward the cake and the photographs and the ordinary joy, and let me go. And across all of it, near the door, I saw Gail Holloway lower herself slowly into a folding chair, one hand feeling behind her for the seat as if she could no longer entirely trust the floor, which in a way she no longer could. It did not feel the way I had imagined it would feel, in the years when I let myself imagine it at all. I had thought, on the worst nights, lying awake beside my sleeping husband after another table, another joke, that there would be a kind of triumph in it if the truth ever got out in front of them, that if the room ever turned, I would feel 16 years lift off my back all at once, like a pack set down at the end of a march. But standing in that field house with the applause dying down into the clatter of forks, I did not feel like I had won a single thing. I felt like a bandage had been pulled off a whole family at once, in front of 400 strangers, and now everyone could see the wound that had been under it the entire time, and no one in that room, least of all me, was going to feel good about the look of it. Kurt found the door and used it. That was the first thing. He gathered his teenage son by the shoulder and steered him out into the parking lot without a word to anyone, and I have not heard him make a joke about paperwork since. Not once, not at any table. Some men, when the ground shifts under them, do not adjust. They simply relocate to ground that has not moved yet. I did not go after him. There was nothing there worth catching. Cole came to me. His face had come apart in a way I had not seen since that porch in the dark before we were married. He stood in front of me and opened his mouth twice before anything came out of it. I let her say those things, he said. For years, at every table. I heard every single one of them, and I told you to let it go, and you let it go, and I let her keep going. He stopped, and his throat worked. I just watched a room of 400 strangers understand who you are in about 90 seconds, and I have been married to you for 6 years. His voice broke clean across the number. I am so sorry, Tessa. I know that is not enough. I know sorry does not reach back and unsay 16 years of dinners. But I am sorry, and I am going to be sorry out loud from now on, in front of people, which I should have been doing the whole time. An apology that arrives late is still worth more than one that never arrives at all. I had learned that too, the hard way, from the other side of it, from the times I had been the late one in my own life. I took his hand. I did not make it easy for him, and I did not make it hard. I just held it, because he was mine, and he was trying, finally, out loud, in a room, where it counted. We are going to talk about all of it, I said. But not here, and not today. Today I need you to do one thing for me. Anything, name it. Go find your mother, I said. She is by the door. She looks like she cannot feel her own legs. Go and sit down next to her, not to defend what she did, not to explain anything, just so that she is not sitting alone in a room full of people who all just found out at the same time. He looked at me, the way you look at someone speaking a language you did not know they had. to the creed he was raised on. Mercy for the person who had just been undone by the truth made no sense at all. And then, to his lasting credit, he went. I stayed where I was for a while and let the recruits come to me, because they wanted to, shyly, 1 and 2 at a time, holding their caps, and I shook each of their hands and told them they had done a genuinely hard thing and that I had been proud to have any part in it. Private Kessler was the very last of them, read to the tops of his 2 big ears, and he started 3 sentences and finished none of them. "Ma'am, I am sorry. I think I might have started. I told my drill sergeant I just could not stand there and—" "Private," I said. "Look at me. You saw something true and you said it out loud to the person standing next to you, at a moment when it would have been much easier to keep your mouth shut and your eyes front. Do not ever, in your whole career, apologize for that. That, right there, is the entire job. Everything else we teach you is just how to survive long enough to keep doing it." He straightened up about 2 inches, and something said in his face that I hope the years are kind to. I have thought about him more than once since. I hope the army keeps him a long time. We are always short of the ones who cannot stand to watch a true thing get called a lie. A woman came up to me while the last of the recruits were still drifting away. A mother, 40 or so, with her graduate hovering a step behind her, too shy to speak. She took both of my hands in both of hers, the way country women do when the words are running short. Her son was going to the infantry, she said. She had not slept a full night in 10 weeks. She had heard the command sergeant major just now, and she wanted to ask me, she said, and then she could not find the end of the question. But I knew the end of the question, because it is the only question those mothers carry. She wanted to know whether the people teaching her boy knew what they were doing. She wanted to know whether he would be given a fair chance to come home to her. I told her the truth, because the truth was the only gift worth handing her. I told her I could not promise her the world would be kind to her son, because it would not, and she had raised him well enough to already know that. But I could promise her that the people who had trained him were the finest I had ever served beside, and that they had not taught him to be lucky. They had taught him to be ready, and that ready was the only thing any of us ever gets to hold on to. She nodded, and her eyes filled, and she squeezed my hands once, hard, and let go, and went back to her boy. Tavares was near the wall when I turned around. He set his campaign hat back on, squared it with 2 fingers, and gave me a nod with an entire conversation folded up inside it. I gave the same nod back, same nod. Some things between soldiers do not need the words and are only cheapened by them. I found Gail by the door, alone, because Cole had done exactly what I asked, but she had waved him off, the way the deeply wounded wave off the very people they have spent years hurting, unable to bear being comforted by them. I sat down in the folding chair next to her. For a long time, neither of us said anything at all. The reception went on around us, warm and loud, cake and cameras and young men lifting little sisters onto their shoulders, and the 2 of us sat in a small pocket of stillness at the edge of it, like 2 stones in the middle of a moving stream, the water going by on both sides. "Every uniform in this place," she said at last, not looking at me, looking straight ahead at the crowd, "looks like the 2 men who came up my front walk to tell me about Nathan." There it was, 16 years, and there it finally was, set down on the table between us, the stone from the bottom of the well, wet and plain and terrible. "I know," I said. "You do not know." It was not sharp when she said it. It was just true, and I let it be true, because it was. "You are right," I said. "I do not know what it is to lose a child. I will not stand here and pretend to. But Gail, listen to me, because I have never once said this to you in 16 years. I know what the road looked like, the one Nathan was on. I have been on roads exactly like it. I have held young men, boys, really, no older than these graduates, while they—" And I stopped, and I chose the smaller word on purpose, because she did not need the larger one. While they were hurt very badly. I know to the ounce what this thing can cost a family. I am not the costume you needed me to be so that you would not have to look at it across your own table. I am the real thing. I always was. And I have come to think that is the exact reason you could not stand the sight of me, Not because I was pretend, because I was not. Because I was the true one, sitting in your dining room, on your holidays, wearing the precise thing that took your boy off the earth. She turned and looked at me then, full on, for what felt like the first time in 16 years, and her face was an old woman's face, wet and undefended, and suddenly very young underneath. The way grief makes people young again, back to the worst day, over and over. I made it into a joke, she said, so that it could not be that. So that when I looked at you, I could see a silly girl in a costume instead of... She could not finish it either. Neither of us could finish our sentences that day. We were two people who had spent 16 years not saying the one thing, and it turns out the muscles for saying it go weak from lack of use. I know, I said again. I understood that a long, long time ago. That is why I kept coming to the table. That is why I kept setting your mother's bowl down carefully. I was not trying to beat you, Gail. I was trying to wait you out. I honestly believed that if I was only patient enough, and gentle enough, and small enough, one day you would look up and finally see me. I looked out at the room, at the graduates, at Tavares standing against the far wall with his campaign hat under his arm now, pretending with great dignity not to be watching the two of us. What I never understood in all those years of waiting is that seeing me was the single hardest thing I could possibly have been asking you to do. I was asking you to look straight at the thing that killed your son and love it anyway. No wonder you needed the costume. We sat with that for a while. The stream ran on around us. What was it for? She said finally. The medal, the blue one. And I watched her catch herself on the word she had used as a knife for 16 years. Watched her almost say little, and then decide, right there in the folding chair, to lay the knife down and let it be an honest question instead. Tell me what actually happened, all of it. I have never once asked you in 16 years, and I am asking you now. It was not forgiveness. I want to be honest with you because you have come all this way with me and you have earned the true version and not the sweet one. It was not the credits rolling. It was not an embrace in the rain. It was not 16 years dissolving in a single July afternoon. Gail Holloway did not become a warm woman that day, and she and I did not walk out of that field house as the thing people mean when they say close. Grief that old does not lift in an hour, and contempt that old leaves scar tissue in both directions. But she had asked me an honest question, in her own voice, with the knife set down on the floor between us, and after 16 years, an honest question is a door. It is a door propped open with the toe of a boot, and a door propped open is all any of us really gets, and it is enough to walk through. So I told her, the road, at dusk, the smell of diesel and copper, the two vehicles, the young men in them, the moment the world came apart. I told her about the boy named Dorn, who I went back into the open for, and the other one, the driver, and the fire I called down and adjusted foot by foot on the radio so that it would land close enough to matter and far enough to spare us. And the long minutes on that road that are the entire reason a 19-year-old private can stand in a field house and recite my name. I told her the true version, not the version on the slide, and I did not make myself smaller in the telling to spare her, the way I had made myself smaller for 16 years, and I did not make myself a hero either. I just told her, plainly, what happened to her son's wife, who had been on a road, like the one that took her son, and who had come home when he did not. I told her the parts I do not put on any slide. How quiet it goes first, before it ever goes loud, a held breath in the whole world. How the training takes over your hands before your mind has caught all the way up, so that you find yourself already doing the next right thing, while some far back room of you is still only just now understanding that this is real and not a drill. I told her about the weight of a grown man who cannot help you carry him, and how you carry him anyway because the other choice is a thing you know you will not be able to live beside afterward. I told her about the sound Dorn made and about the thing I said to him to keep him with me on that road, which was not brave and was not clever. It was just his mother's name, said over and over, low, into his ear, because in that minute his mother's name was the strongest rope I had. And I threw it to him and told him to hold on. I did not tell her any of that to wound her. I told her because she, of every person on this earth, had earned the right to know that her son's kind of story does not end the way the films tell it, in slow music and soft light. It ends with a woman down on her knees in the dirt, using a mother's name as a rope, and pulling. I watched her understand that I had known her son's world from the inside of it, had loved men inside it, had lost a few of them, and had chosen to keep going back anyway. And I watched 16 years of a certain small idea of me quietly tip over in her mind and fail to get back up. She listened to every word of it. She did not interrupt once. When I finished, she did not say the word sorry, not out loud, not in so many words, because some people cannot get their mouths around that particular word, and Gail Holloway was one of them, and I had stopped needing her to be someone else. But she reached over, slowly, with her old hand, the same hand that had ironed her dead son's shirt at 2 a.m, and would not let anyone else touch it. And she laid it down on top of my hand, on the ribbons, on the little blue one. And she left it there, and did not move it. And from Gail Holloway, that was an entire cathedral of an apology. And I received it as one. Cole came and stood behind our 2 chairs, with 2 plates of cake he did not know what to do with. The eternal errand boy, holding sweetness he could not deliver. And the 3 of us stayed there, while the field house slowly emptied out around us, the families drifting into the long gold light of the afternoon, until we were nearly the last ones in the building. On our way out, we passed the training hall next door, and its doors were open, and on the far wall, 6 feet up, in a plain black frame, hung the photograph. Gail slowed. I had not planned it. I would never have pointed it out to her. In 16 years, I had never once said, at any table, there is a picture of me on a wall where the army trains its children, and they teach my name. But the doors were open, and she saw the ribbon before she saw the face, the way Kessler had. And then she saw the face, and she stopped walking. She stood in front of that black frame for a long moment, and she read the small brass plaque under it. The citation reduced to a few plain lines, the year spelled out. The act named in the flat, unshowy language the Army uses for the things that matter most. She read it twice. I watched her lips move through it the second time. And then Gail Holloway did a thing that I will carry with me for whatever is left of my life. She lifted her hand, the same hand, the ironing hand, the drawer she had not opened in 14 years, made flesh. And she reached up and she straightened the frame where it hung the smallest fraction off level, a ½ degree, the way a mother reaches up and straightens a collar before a boy walks out the door. She smoothed it true against the wall, and she said, very quietly, to the photograph, or to me, or to a 23-year-old who was not there, I could not tell you which, and I did not ask. There you are. I want to say one thing to you, whoever you are, wherever you are sitting, because I suspect a few of you know exactly what that tent felt like, and I am talking now mostly to you. If the people who are supposed to know you best keep getting you wrong, keep making you smaller, keep telling you that the ache of being made small is a scene you're choosing to make, I want you to hear this from a woman who spent 16 years holding one corner of that sheet with her own 2 hands. You do not owe them a smaller version of yourself. You never did. Kindness is real, and patience is real, and some people's cruelty is only grief wearing a mask that got stuck. And it is worth trying to understand them. It is worth a great deal. But understanding a wound does not mean you have agreed to be the one it opens on forever. At some point, standing on your own ground in your own life, you are allowed to simply stop helping them believe the lie. Not with a speech, not with a war, not by humiliating anyone, just by being, plainly and without apology and without shrinking, exactly the size you actually are. And here's the part that surprised me most, so I will hand it to you for nothing in case you need it. The recognition, when it finally came, did not come from the people I had spent 16 years trying to convince. It came from a 19-year-old boy who had never met me, who had studied a map with the name scrubbed off and who could not stand to watch a true thing get called a lie in front of him. The right people will already know your name. Sometimes they are the youngest people in the room. Sometimes they are the only ones who have not yet learned how to look away. So stand where you stand. Wear your little medals. Somewhere out there, someone studied you and got you exactly right and is only waiting for the chance to say so out loud. Thank you for staying with me all this way. Take care of yourself and take care of the true ones around you. They are rarer than they ought to be, and they are worth the whole rest of it put together.